Okay, I think we are good to go. All right. Today we're going to talk about how the students are going to take the assessments within eDoctrina. And we are also going to take a look at how the teachers can score those particular responses. This is all going to be demo data. This is a demo assessment with demo students. So none of this is actual live data, but we'll be able to see the features and functionalities that the student will see when they are actually taking the assessment online. The students will already be assigned the assessment within eDoctrina. Teachers do not have to worry about assigning this particular assessment to students. That will be done already. You are just responsible for having your students log in, take the test online, and then grade the responses afterwards. So students are going to have an account for the student portal. When they log into the student portal, they are automatically going to be on what we call the to-do page or the incomplete assignments. These are assessments that they are scheduled to take, or in some cases have started and will need to continue. In this particular situation, we're going to focus on the assessment that is assigned to us that has the start button. There's a test window that is assigned, and the student is only able to access this particular assessment during that test window. They will not be able to access this assessment on the weekend. They will not be able to access the assessment outside of the window that was set up for the student. So, in order to take this assessment, the student can click the start button. There may be a pop-up that comes up on the screen indicating what the student can or cannot do. Some tests may be available for reopen. Some tests may not. Basically, this gives them just a message that you're able to start this assessment. Here's the date and time. They can read through this and then click go. Students are going to see the assessments on the left-hand side, questions 1 through 5 in this particular case. The questions are all white because the student has not answered that question as of yet. So the student will be able to see the question and the answer choices. This particular question is a multiple choice question. We're just going to click a random answer. The student can select the question number or the green button that says select unanswered question, next unanswered question. They also may have some tools available depending on how the assessment was set up, whether it's a text-to-speech, Google Translate, whatever was set up ahead of time on the assessment. So there may be some tools that are available for the student. When I select next unanswered question, question number 1 turns blue just to indicate that there has been an answer recorded. In this particular case, as soon as I select an answer, you also can see the blue has answer icon, again, indicating that the answer has been selected. I can skip ahead if I want to and come back to particular questions. If a student does try to submit the test without unanswered questions or without answering all of those questions, they will get an alert that says, are you sure you want to submit? You do have some unanswered questions. So going on to question number 3, this question is a little bit different than the multiple choice. This is going to be a teacher scored question where the students are asked to do 2 things. First, we are asking the students to redraw the objects in an array. Below is an equation editor where the student is able to type in numbers, type in letters. They can type in this particular situation. You can see as soon as I start typing, this little modified toolbar appears indicating that it is saving the response for the student. So as the student is typing their response, drawing, whatever the case may be, eDoctrina is recording that information behind the scenes in case the student gets kicked off the test. So if I were to lose my internet connection, or if I were to, the computer battery dies, I would have my progress for questions 1 and 2 saved up until the point that I lose that connection. So looking at question number 3, there is a pencil icon. When I hover over that, it says draw image. When I click on this, we are going to have an image box that appears that is going to allow the student to redraw that object. Now, I can increase this box if I need a little bit more space to work in. If you're going to be asked to do a lot of things or draw a bigger area, maybe plot something, you can increase the size of this box just for flexibility. I can also move this out of the way so that I can see the question that is being asked. Now, students automatically are going to have the pencil selected. When I put my mouse and I hold down, or whether I'm using a stylus or my finger, you're automatically going to start to draw. The first indication, or students may be inclined to just scribble on this drawing. We obviously want to discourage that, as again, eDoctrina is going to think that the student is putting an answer in there. It's going to start recording that information. Sometimes when you get a lot of students that are scribbling at the same time, it can kind of get a little tied up. If I make a mistake, if I don't want to have that, I can clear all of my responses. I also do have an eraser tool. So in this situation, I basically want to draw my triangles in the order that I want to. So we're just going to put a couple in here. And I'm using a mouse, so it's a little bit slower and a little bit not difficult, but if your students are using a stylus or a touch screen, that's obviously going to be a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. So I'm going to draw those in there, and then I'm going to say add drawing. If I cancel out of here, it's obviously not going to save that information. As soon as I select add drawing, that drawing is going to reappear. If I click on the drawing and click my drawing tool again, it will load that image back up. It should load that image back up. If I need to make any adjustments, I can also delete that out of there and start again if I need to. So this image is automatically saved. I can adjust this if I need to. The students are most likely just going to leave it as is. The next option is down here in my answer box. I need to then write the repeated number addition sentence to find the total. So we are just going to type in here. Oh, and I accidentally clicked in the wrong spot. So you can see I hit that undo or Control Z, and it went back and put my image back in there. So that's kind of a good indication of what could happen. If a student accidentally puts their cursor in this particular area and hits the backspace, it could delete out of there. So that was actually a good example of what can happen as the students are taking this test, so that you're aware. I can always do the undo button or Control Z to get that image back in there. Okay, so question number 3 is good to go. I feel comfortable with that. I'm going to go on to question number 4. Again, here's another situation where we need to show work. I'm just going to draw something in here for sake of time. And then we're going to say they need 4 packages, whatever the case may be. Question number 5 has 2 equation editors. So there are actually 2 situations where the student needs to show their work for kind of part 1 and then show their work for part 2. And at the bottom, they then need to fill in the final answer. So again, I can open up this drawing tool. I can add my drawing in there. We're going to then add another drawing down here. 20 miles, 4 days. This is obviously not the right answer, but you get the picture. And then we're going to say 5 days. Just going to put in answers here. So now that I've answered everything, the student does get an indication that all questions are answered. It does prompt the submit button to turn green. In that case, again, just indicating that the student has completed all the answers and there are no blanks. However, again, I can still submit the test even if I have blank answers. It will alert me that that information is needing to be looked at. So I'm going to say submit. Again, one more warning. Are you sure you're done? Are you ready to go? We're going to say yes.
Christy, one moment, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I saw a part where when you put up the drawing, it actually blocks the question. Can you just show us again how you're able to move the drawing? Because I know students, they're going to want to, as they draw, then go back to the question sometimes.
Absolutely.
We read. Can you just show that one more time?
Yep. Let me actually see if there's one in this assessment, because I already submitted my test, so I can't go back into it without saving. So actually, let's pull up another. We will pull this up on.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I think it was important to just reiterate when the student either the connection goes off or their drawing gets erased. Remember, it does have that history of the drawing, and I like that part. So like when you made that mistake almost on purpose, you're able to undo it.
Yes.
That reminds me also with Ames Web a bit, like if we are in the middle of the test and something happens, the teacher can go back, either refresh the test, reassign the test if they want to start all over, or just refresh it to continue where they left off. So I really like that parallel.
Absolutely. Now, in this particular situation, the only reason that I cannot go back into the test right now is because I did click the submit button. So if I did not click submit, and if the test, again, if I lost connection, I would have that continue button similar to this other assessment that was assigned to the student. So in this situation, because I did click submit, that is kind of like the finalize, you want to submit your answers. However, if I did start to answer this question, so we're going to bring this back up just in a different screen. So when I click on my drawing image, I am able to, if I find that little cursor icon, I can move this all across my screen if I want to, so that I can position it to see what the question was and then add that information in here. So if I want to make my adjustments, and then I can add that drawing. Now, if I click the drawing tool again, it is actually going to allow me to select a separate drawing. So that's also something to indicate just for the students. If I put this in here right now, that's going to actually add another drawing onto this screen. So I can click that and delete it. If I double click on this particular drawing, I can then bring it back up to add additional pieces, and then we can save again, and I can save. Now, again, if I accidentally have my cursor in here, let's say I'm starting to add 4 + 4, but you can see that image is still selected, and I hit back, or I wanted to hit backspace because I wanted to actually remove that plus sign. If I just click undo or Control Z, you can bring that back up again. So yeah, that's a very good point. Again, it's a learning process. It's a learning curve. We just kind of want to maybe indicate to students, once you're done in that section, move your mouse to the next section that you want to answer. But yes.
To that, just to let you know as well, them doing this on their test won't be the first time that they do this. We do have that equation editor through that, through the New York State site, where even during their application problems, teachers, would be a great idea if you have your application problem, let's say up on the board, there's a blank version, right, where they can actually go in and use it and kind of, again, practice using the tool, because it's really more about, being familiar with the tool.
Yes, absolutely. And we did create this equation editor to mimic what they're going to see on the state. So there's a lot of the same features and functionality. Okay, so once the student submits their response, it's going to automatically go to complete. They are going to maybe see, there's a couple of different icons or notices that they will see. This one, for example, says results not released yet. I haven't graded the teacher scored portion. It may say grading in progress because they've started to grade, or the student may see their percent in points, again, depending on how the assessment was set up. So this student is done. We're good to go. So now I'm going to log in as a teacher so that I can then grade those open-ended or those teacher scored questions and see what they actually put into that drawing piece. So I'm going to log out here, and I'm going to go in as a teacher. And your dashboard or your homepage is going to look a little bit different. Again, this is my demo site, so things may look a little bit different on the homepage. But whether you have a button on your homepage or under the quick links, I'm going to go to the teacher dashboard. And the teacher dashboard is going to be my home base for grading the assessment, looking at the assessment, finding the information that I need. If you have some things filtered, and perhaps you were looking at the teacher dashboard the other day, eDoctrina does like to save filters, which in some situations is very helpful because I can go right back to the information I'm looking for. In other cases, you may not find what you're looking for because you have filters selected. What we recommend is up in the top right-hand corner, you click Reset Filters to just get everything back to square one. We want to reset everything. I'm not going to click that right now just because for time's sake, I want to keep my selections, but you can click Reset Filters. When I'm on the teacher dashboard, the first thing I like to do is I like to immediately go right here to assessment, because I want to get the assessment that I'm looking for in this particular case, it's this March 10th example. This is the assessment. You can search by the name of the assessment and or the ID number. So each assessment has that unique ID number, as you're familiar with. You can search either way. You also can select either a class or a set of students. So if you're giving this to your class, you can just pull your class or classes so that you can get all of the students and kind of work with all of the students at one time. Okay. Once I have my group of students selected, whether that's class or individual students, and once I have my assessment selected, I'm going to use this very last option on this row that says check student answers. Okay. So my students class, my assessment is selected. I'm going to say check student answers. This is going to bring me to what we call the answer entry verification page. When I log into this particular page, I am going to see a key that pops up. You have the ability to hide this so that it doesn't keep showing. But this key is kind of helpful to understand which items I need to look at. So for teacher scored questions, those are going to come in as blank white. That means that the question has data, but it has not been scored yet. My multiple choice questions are going to either be red for incorrect, green for correct, or it could be yellow, which means that an answer choice was not selected. So that's another option that you may want to take a look at. If a student does not answer a multiple choice question, that will come in as yellow. Okay. When I close this, I can always bring that key up from the top right corner if I need to, again, just to indicate and see what that information is. So right now I logged in and I took the test as Agatha. I can see so far she has 1 out of 9 points, and it gives me the indication she started the test and ended at this particular date and time. Now, again, question number 1 and 2 are already set. I don't need to make adjustments. However, if a student, you know that maybe they missed, so let's say this was a blank yellow, you could bring the student up and say, hey, look at this question. Here's question number 2. Can you answer this for me? A, B, C, D. They could say, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I meant to select A. I missed that question. You can make adjustments to this by clicking on the box. Okay. So if I just click on the letter, I am able to make those adjustments if needed. What I really want to focus on is those teacher scored questions. So again, question 3, 4, and 5 are blank. I'm going to click on this black corner of this particular question for number 3, and I am going to bring up what we call the online student answer. So here is my question at the top section here. It does also show me the question again when I'm looking at the student answer. Now I can scroll through this and you can see that it's kind of small. It's a little bit hard to read. If I click on the view answer in full size, I can bring up the whole thing. Again, I have the question that was asked of the student, and then I can see the drawing that they submitted through the drawing tool in the equation editor, as well as what they put in that answer input box. Now, if you click on this and you don't see anything, I like to give it a second. So eDoctrina does have to kind of go out, look at what the student put, bring it into this report. So there are going to be times where when you look at this information, it may not load right away. I just give it a second and you can open this up, kind of just let it load for a second and it should pull that information in there. So I can take a look at this information and decide, okay, I'm going to give this student 2 points. Now, if you want to continue working with question 3, but go to the next student on the list, you can click this down arrow. I don't have to hit save. I can click this down arrow and it is automatically, I can see with the little pop-up here, it is automatically going to save and open the same question for the next student so that you can stick and work within one question at a time. You're going to be familiar with that question. You can take a look and score an individual question for every student in your list before then moving on to the next one. Now, in this particular case, the student did not answer this question. However, if they did, I would have that information and be able to then look at this question, look at the student response, and provide a score for that student. Okay. Now, this answer entry verification or this answer entry view is one way that I can look at a student response. There is another way, and this is depending on your preference of how you like to look at this information. I also have a blue button in the corner that's called the Student Response Grader. If I click on this, this provides me with just a little bit of a different view to see these questions. I have, again, my students on the left, their score at the moment. Right now, it's going to default to my list view. What I want to do is I'm going to switch to my page view so that I can then select a question similar to what we just did with the answer entry view. I'm going to select my page view. This then allows me to, for number 4, for example, here was the question, answer input. Here's my student response. There's the work, and there's the answer that they put in that particular case. Again, I can indicate, well, the student answered part of the question. Now, instead of having a down arrow, I can then just select the next student on the list. It will still keep number 4 selected, and I can respond or grade the response that way. So both of these work the same way. I can view the student response and I can make a selection. It's really going to be a user preference on which view you like better. You may indicate that you like this view where I can see, I can expand the question, and then I can click that down arrow in order to score. And then finally, I'm going to look at question number 5. Again, this has a double equation editor. So there were 2 selections for the student that they needed to input, and then 1 answer box at the bottom. So I can take a look at both answers. I can then close that bigger view. I can scroll through this option if I want to, and then again, make the selection. And in this case, I'm just going to save because I don't want to go to the next student. And this student has now been scored. Their assessment has been scored. If the verified checkbox is not selected, that is one final step that I need to do to kind of confirm that this test has been scored and the answers are ready to go. Now, you also, once you score all students, you can also select this checkbox at the very top of the screen to verify all students at one time. So that is kind of the last and final check of, I looked at the student responses, I gave an appropriate score, the student is done taking the test, we are ready to go so that I can then finalize their test and look at the results, in the reporting area of eDoctrina.
So they must have the verification thing checked, or
that needs to be checked in order to view reports. So if you're looking at a report in eDoctrina and it says for a student answers not verified, that's where we need to go back and make sure that those answers are verified. As soon as the student completes the assessment and submits it, this completed check mark will automatically apply. So you can see that these 2 students have not completed the test yet, which is why those are blank. As soon as a student submits the test, that completed gets checked off. And then the verification is just the last step, again, because there's those teacher scored questions. If it is all multiple choice, you will not need to verify because the system identifies these are the correct answers. They are verified. Okay. So just as a recap, to get there, once the student has taken the test, we selected whether it's a class or students, we have our assessment selected, and we went to check student answers, which then brings up automatically the answer entry verification page. We also do have the ability to switch to the student response grader. And again, I like to recommend the page view so that I can see the particular question just individually. So I am on question 1. I can look at question number 3. If I select the next student, question number 3 automatically is applied, and I can continue down my list of students.
Christy, one question about the teacher dashboard here.
Yes.
I'm noticing that there's a red asterisk on class and assessment, but right now we have students selected and not a class. Is it Is it that
Yeah.
class must be chosen or just something from that top list?
It's essentially, that is a little bit misleading. It's essentially something from that top row. So if I don't select a class, but I have students, it will allow me. It kind of just means you need a group in order to look at that. So that is a bit misleading. That does get confusing for people. But yeah, since I have students selected, it does not, I'm not required to select a class. However, I do need an assessment. So if I do try to, we can clear this right now. If I don't have an assessment selected and I try to say that, it's going to say you don't have any assessments selected. I can go to the answer entry verification page, but it's not going to really know what I'm trying to look at. So I do need to select that assessment.
Got it. So in this case now, I could, for example, select certain subgroups of students if I wanted to just analyze their results.
Yes,
whether
absolutely.
that be possibly students with IEPs, maybe English language learners, certain
Right.
demographics, whatever that may be, and I can view just their responses, and the other students won't be shown on
Yes.
the student answer sheet.
Yep. So exactly. So in that case, I only have 3 students selected. That's all I saw in my answer entry verification page. But if I would switch this and remove those students and select my entire class, then I would get all, however many kids are in that class. So we could switch this, and say clear. And now instead of 3 students, now again, these students may not have taken it. I have these, however many, 10 students. So depending on that selection, you just have to have a group of students to look at, whether it's in a class or, like you said, a subgroup or selections that you've made.
I think that could also be useful. So if a teacher is, like, say, grading the class, that's fine. But then let's say some people have to make it up. Let's say they just want to go to those real fast with one kid. Then maybe just selecting that one kid, you can just kind of filter it and just look at that one kid who had to make up a test.
Yes, absolutely.
But for the most part, I think it would be their class.
Yes, that's a great point for making up. Or again, if you have one student that skipped a couple questions and you want them to come answer them, then rather than bringing up everybody, I can just select that one student and say, hey, I want to double check this. You left it blank, whatever the case may be. And then I can just bring up one record without showing all the rest of the class. Okay, so is there any other, let me think, I'm trying to think if there's any other things that we missed or there want to reiterate. You know what, one more thing is, what I do want to mention too is on this answer entry verification page, teachers do have at the very far right, and we kind of tried to hide it as far as we could to the right, there is a garbage can icon. If you do click that, it is going to remove the answers for the student. So just be cautious, but I do want to say it is on that page. Again, it's not really easily. We did try to kind of keep it over there so that people don't accidentally click it, but that would be an indication or an example if you want the student to, you think that they need to just start from the beginning, you want to wipe out all those answers. But as with anything, that's a universal symbol for delete. If you click that, it is going to delete the responses. So just be cautious, try to leave that alone. I did want to mention though that it is on that page, just to caution. I know one other thing I forgot to mention. When you are on this page or you are in the view student answer selection, there is going to be this min and max button. While it looks like that is going to allow me to select the maximum points for this question, it is not. This is something that we're trying to get rid of. It kind of causes confusion. If I click max, it's actually going to set the maximum amount of points for every question on the test. So do not click max. I would just use this drop down. You could type a number 2 in here. You could type a number 1. I think the easiest is just to use the drop down because it's there. But do not use the min and max. The min and max will set the entire test. So we do have examples where teacher hits max, they don't read the pop-up, they hit okay. Next thing you know, the entire test is max. They tend to panic and then they click minimum. Next thing you know, the entire test is blank. So obviously, if that accidentally happens, we do have ways that we can get back the original scores. We can get things back to where they were. But as It is confusing. We do have some problems with it sometimes. So I like to caution, just try not to hit those buttons because it will score the entire test, not just that single question. We are looking into ways of having a way to basically say, I do want to give the maximum points to that question very quickly, because as you're scoring this, you do want to save some time. So min and max will score the entire test. It does have a pop-up that will fill and save the following rules. So just so you know, there is a warning. If you do still continue to click yes, it's going to do that functionality. So that was one other thing I did remember that I wanted to mention on this particular screen.
Yeah,
so
there was
Chrissy, two other quick things. Sorry, Gabrielle. The first is just running it back to the garbage can for a second.
Yes.
I believe I know the functionality, but I think it's important for everyone. Especially because there's only one student here. The one at the way top in the yellow is deleting all scores for all students, correct?
Yes, correct.
And now, just a clarification, if we choose that button while we have a filtered view, like with this student here, we only see one student, is that deleting only the students that we would see on this screen, say a subset of 2 or 3 students? Or will that delete everyone even if they're not shown on the screen?
No, it will. It's only the functionality or only the selections that are on this screen. So if I click delete all for this one student, it's only going to be one. It will leave all the rest alone. It will only delete what is on this screen.
Got it. And the second one was when you were in the scoring view, if you don't mind bringing that up again for a second.
Yep.
There were 2 things that I noticed that I'm thinking others may have the same question. When you were scoring the question in the other view, there was the up and down arrows to increment the score. And I saw that it was actually giving decimal values. We obviously have a 0, 1, or 2 set here. Would those be able to save? And would that cause any possible issue? Would it allow me to put a 1.3 if there was that accidentally put in?
I don't believe it would allow you to do it. See, when I click it, it kind of disappears. So actually it won't let me go up. Let's see if it will save. So it actually will save, but I don't think it'll allow you to save less than. It will not allow you to go more than the total points.
Right. So so again, if this is a 0 to 2 point question, it looks like it will give us a decimal value.
It will, yeah.
So that's just something to consider school-wide.
Yes.
If we're giving any partial credit, or if it's simply a 0, 1, or 2, that's just worth noting.
Which is why I kind of recommend just sticking with the drop down, because that's the scores, that's your rubric. Those are the points that are available. That's kind of the easiest, and that's the most popular way, is just to make that selection from the drop down. But yes, you can see that is there. And if you do happen to hit the arrows, it would do the decimal points.
Okay. And there's also a feedback option there. Is that something that we may use later down the road?
Yeah, you can. So that's basically when I click in this box, I can type and it will save that response. You also can click this little bubble icon, and there's actually the ability to set like quick comments. So if you have, check your work and resubmit. Some of these are default, but you could say, I definitely see an improvement. Keep it up. I can just click that arrow. I can add my own. You do have the ability to put in teacher feedback if you want. This will appear on various reports. If you allow the student to see teacher feedback in their portal, they would see these comments as well. But yeah, that is something that you could use. That is available. And it's either you can have these shown on, again, like I mentioned, reports, or if you have it set up so the student sees a detailed report of their assessment, you could include the teacher comments if you wanted to as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Either of those work as well.
Yeah, he covered one of my questions actually, but I had another question, or at least maybe show them. I think it was on one of our trainings we had done. I don't know if I'm using the right term, might be answer history, where a kid can, let's say that we want to see more than just what they came up with at the end, especially when we're trying to analyze data. Yes, the answer is important, but it may be helpful for teachers to see what was that thought process like for that child. Can you demonstrate that?
Yes. So I was going to mention that too, actually, for multiple choice questions, for example, if the student, so when I click again on this little corner icon, this gives me a lot of information about the question, individual questions. On my general tab, it's showing here the student selected C. If I go over to answer history, it actually will show kind of the progress that was made. So this student, in this case, they only selected C, which is, it's going to show you a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 being A, 2 being B, 3 being C, 4 being D. And it can, in this particular case, it shows that she selected C and got 1 point for that. Now, if the student selected C and then went back and selected B, and then went back and selected A, and then went back and selected C, it will show that information. The other thing is if you're looking at a, let's say it's an assessment with a open-ended question that's more of like text, you're asking the students to write a response, it will record all of their keystrokes. So you would see in this answer history, the character of this story, and then, you know, maybe they pause to like think, and then it'll say the character of this story is Snoopy. You will see that whole train of thought, and it will record all of their responses so that you can see, again, what were they thinking and that progress of them answering the question. So now we are also, there is a little bug. So in this case, you can see that I was messing around with those point values. This is a great example where we started with 2 points. Then I accidentally switched it to a decimal, and you can see I was messing around with this. So it records every single action. So that's actually a great indication of the answer history for this one. What we are doing and what we are trying to work with right now is to also get the images recorded in here for this answer history. So for example, you know, if the student answered the question and they put this smiley face in there, and then that got deleted accidentally and they submitted the test, that answer history will still appear. So right now there was a bug. We're trying to get the images to be in here as well. So again, if the student says, I filled that answer in and I click submit, but it's not showing now, you do have the ability to see what was recorded in that test session under the answer history. But again, this is very helpful for especially the questions that they may be typing a response, or in general, the multiple choice questions where you can see if they kind of were going back and forth with their selection.
So Christy, on the general tab that you're on right now, if you maybe go to question 3, for example, one of the teacher scored ones.
Yep.
I do notice that in these cases, we see the question up top, and then we do see the question again at the bottom. So it's kind of doubled there. Does that hide question button at the top, that blue one there? Does that just allow us to have, okay, that's what I was
just a bigger view. Yeah. So that's another option. If they're more comfortable with this layout, you know, yes, you can hide the question, since you're right. It is kind of doubled. It is kind of reiterated. So yeah, I can hide that question and just have a bigger view, which then allows me to not have to pop that open. You know, that could kind of be a little maybe confusing at first until you get used to this page. That does give you the bigger image of what they drew in any of those answer boxes.
Got it. And one thing, if you don't mind actually bringing it back for a moment, because one thing I could see as a possible hiccup on somebody's end using this for the first time, if you scroll in the box at the top there,
yes,
you kind of see the builder view of like equation input, and that could get confusing for folks, or maybe it looks as if a kid didn't input something.
Didn't answer. Yes.
So again, I think it's just worth noting for anyone that might be either confused by the double, or at least know that you can hide the question up top, and that might just make things a little bit easier to work with.
I would almost like to see the student answer like bold or bigger or color, just to kind of indicate, like you said, for those first users that, hey, this is the section you want to look at to see, because you're right, it does show the question kind of as it was entered. So we have an equation editor, and then we have a text input box. That is how the question was built within the assessment portion. Those are great questions. You also, I didn't mention with the feedback, you can also record feedback. That's another just extra bells and whistles of this screen. So if the teacher wanted to just record, That may come into play. I always use like a foreign language example, maybe the teacher wants to reiterate the pronunciation of a word, or if they want to record the feedback because the student, maybe has a visual impairment and they want to be able to hear that. So that's just there's a lot of bells and whistles. That's just kind of another one of those that's available for the teachers for that feedback section, but not required.
Okay, do we feel like we're good?
Yeah, this was really helpful. And just kind of the last thing, and Crystal, I'll kind of defer to you. I'm not sure if teachers will be doing this, but is there any way, or is it worth noting how teachers can run any type of report? I'm not sure if that's something they do already, whether it's item analysis or just kind of a score report in general. Is that something that we think may be worth showing?
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. Christy, if you would be able to go to the answer page that lights up the students' names with the answers that they chose in the multiple choice, that would be great just to show on the screen for someone who's not as familiar with analyzing the data on the platform.
Yeah.
And then there is an export button where we can download that to Excel and then be able to manipulate it the way that we want to with pivot tables and all that fun stuff that Michael and I love to do. So if you wouldn't mind showing that, Christy, that would be great. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask is, does eDoctrina have the ability to import demographic information from Infinite Campus? And the reason why I ask is because I heard Michael ask a great question about, I could potentially analyze the data of just a subgroup of students, but will the system sort those students for us and flag them as IEP students or as students with disabilities or as L students? Do we have that capability in eDoctrina? Because if we do, from the administrator standpoint, from the special educator standpoint, that would be amazing.
Yeah, right now we don't have the ability to update or upload or import demographics. The only thing we really can do in that sense is import test modifications. So if you needed to have a student set to always have the test with text to speech or Google Translate, we could do that. We can set up, but we don't have demographics right now.
Okay, but that is also good to know, because as we get closer to CPT, we're going to need to know how to do that. And any student that has that sort of testing accommodation should be privy to it for all assessments.
Right.
If the IEP deems that that's necessary. So learning how to set those accommodations up on the back end is going to be important to us.
Yes, absolutely. We can do a thing on that. So with reports, again, we're on the teacher dashboard. Reporting is pretty much the same as looking at any of these actions like checking answers. I need an assessment and I need students, whether, again, that's class or individual students. So the reports, I like to say, go from kind of basic to more advanced as we move from left to right. So my individual student report is going to just give me all of the information for that assessment. So I'm going to click on this. We do have a lot of different options on the screen. If you want kind of a breakdown of the question that was asked, the student response, I switched this to question text. Again, you can play around with these settings. Really, the best way that I recommend is to just click on an option, run the report, see what it gives you. That's the best way to learn. You can't hurt anything. You're not going to mess anything up by just making those selections. This is where, Michael, you asked about the feedback. I could also include the teacher comments. So for example, if I want to give this report and I want to export it as a PDF, to send to a parent or post somewhere, you could show the teacher feedback and the teacher comment if you wanted to. Those are extra options. But basically, I'm going to say question text. I'm going to run this report. And again, I only have one student selected in this particular case, but I can see the question, the answer choice. So right here, this says that green is the correct answer. The student did answer that correctly, so they got that question right. Question number 2, correct answer was B. I'm sorry, the correct answer was A, they selected B. Now, this will also show what they put into that equation editor. So similar to the check answers view, here's my question. If I go down to student answer, here's the actual drawing that they submitted on that equation editor, and then the text input that they put there. If I look on the right-hand side, I can also see the point value that was associated with it. If I scroll down, here's question number 4. And again, question number 5 with the responses that they submitted. So that's kind of nice. Again, you can see the information that they put into that particular question when you're looking at this. And the very bottom will give me their total score and their percent points. Okay. So that's kind of one way. Again, as I look at this information, I can look at class summary. I can look at a breakdown item analysis. This is going to show me individual. Now, again, I'm going to look at the item analysis mostly with a whole class. So this would allow me to see how many students selected each answer choice. So I can see for question number 1, most of them selected C. Question number 2, I wonder why a lot of students were selecting C and a lot of them were selecting A. This gives you a breakdown and just understanding of how the students answered each question choice. This can be exported to Excel. The other thing about this report is if you really want to look at the data in live action, I can switch this report to dynamic and it will actually refresh every couple seconds. So as the students are taking the test, if you want to see those responses that are coming in solely for multiple choice, I could take a look at how the students are answering those questions. And every couple seconds, this will refresh and I would see those bars start to move. So that's an option as well. And then, of course, if I want to...
Sorry, Christy, if we talk about the dynamic report, is that only showing answers once the students fully submit the test? Or
yes, that should be once they submit the test. Yeah. And I'll double check. I believe it's once they submit the test, but I'll double check to see, is it when they make an answer selection? I'll double check on that for you, but I believe it's when they submit the test.
I would assume that as well, and that would make sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I have one question as well, because it is going to come up for many of our teachers, and I want to make sure I phrase this as best as I can. So right now, as you know, we're doing the paper copies and the answer scan sheets. In the math world, we also do it for a Spanish test. Now, right now, nothing changes because this answer sheets are bubbles. Now that we're talking about online testing, we're going to have another test. Obviously, we have it in Spanish as well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I guess the student would choose which one they would use to answer, and then they could also have maybe a hard copy or something of the other language. But my question is really coming about looking at the item analysis, because we use that so much here. How are you able to, if let's say I'm making up a number, 15 are taking it in English and 7 are taking it in Spanish, are you able to combine that data to look at it as a class, even though some are taking the Spanish test?
You should be able to select more than one assessment. And now, again, this is kind of a bad example because I don't have much data simulated, but you can select more than one. Now, the only thing with that is it's going to kind of break it out with each assessment. So here would be, let's pretend this is my English version, and let's pretend this is my Spanish version. It's not going to necessarily like overlap those results. There could be ways, there might be some other reports that we can explore, or maybe like a custom report that we could kind of merge those data points together, especially if it's the same exact test, just one is in Spanish and one is in English. There are ways that we can kind of manipulate that a little bit more, so we can explore that. But most of these reports do allow you to select more than one assessment. Now, getting a little bit tricky. There is this line called advanced reports. It's typically hidden because you're going to see in a second when I open this, there's like a million other responses. So we typically hide that just for a cleaner screen. There is a multi-assessment report that I'm not going to run that right now, but that might fit your needs because it is going to look at both assessments and kind of merge that data a little bit better. So we can play around. Once there's some data in the system, we can revisit that and kind of either determine this report might work, or we can create custom reports for you that then would be in this little line. And it could be a specific report that is like, here's the one we're going to use for our Spanish assessments. There's also, you know, custom reports. This is really just pulling the data into like an Excel format. So you may want to say, I want to see students, name, total score. But those are options. So we can look at that down the line. Once there's some data in there, we can play around with those different reports and kind of see what fits best.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. So Christy, I want to just thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us today. I think it's going to be very helpful for our teachers to refer back to as we go through the process. I'm sure you'll be available by email if we need to have some questions answered, but I think that this is a really nice foundation for them. So thank you again.
And please also within eDoctrina, under the help button down here at the bottom, it says contact help desk. That will actually pop open an email. Anybody is free to use that. So please, you know, if anyone has a question, that goes right to our help desk, which includes me as well as some others. So that, you know, there's a couple eyes on it. We can answer your question. So teachers are able to use that if you'd like, and submit a request that way. As specific as possible is always best. We can answer those questions, or you can also just email help@edoctrina.org. That's another option as well.
Perfect. So let's encourage our teachers to use that, Gabrielle. And this way they can get some answers if they need some as they're, you know, as we move to this online platform. It looks like we have enough Chromebooks right now that are touchscreen to be able to go to the online platform. And so we're going to hopefully be doing that in the next few weeks. And then as we live it, we'll learn and take it one step at a time. So Michael and Gabs, thank you so much for being here today to help us through this simulation. And Christy, again, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, have a great day.
Thanks. You too.